Ahoy hoy gang, if this is your first time with us, welcome, and if you're coming from a previous video, hey, we love to see it, and I hope you're doing well. Here we are, Season 3. This is... wow. Look, I'm not gonna beat around the bush, Season 3 is a lot, but it's probably the closest any season gets to what King of the Hill is at its very core. Season 1 was about the family, Season 2 was about building Arlen, and Season 3 is the future, growth, and a new tomorrow. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so we must ask those time-old questions. What worked? What failed? And what southern compliments are actually insults thinly veiled? There's only one way to see. Let's review Season 3! In the aftermath of the Megalomart explosion, all of Arlen is reeling. We get our first appearance of the fire chief that will show up later in the season, and sure enough, Chuck Mangione survives the blast, but doesn't necessarily feel so good. And as hope is almost lost, Hank and Luann are taken out of the rubble, Hank shaken and Luann's hair scorched off. Her reaction to her hair being gone is actually a brilliantly harrowing scene. If she was, say, some super vain, self-centered person, it would feel like a just desserts in a way, but Luann was doing her best to get through beauty school. Her hair was her life. Hearing her screams, her pain of loss, it genuinely makes your heart hurt, and that is in no small part to the dynamite performance Brittany Murphy leads. Imagine a season premiere opening with an explosion from the last season that takes a character who's tried to make the best of a bad situation and just throws her right into the explosion. King of the Hill could do it because of the goodwill they've established with the viewers. You can trust the show to take dramatic leaps like this, and those weren't even the biggest reveals of the episode. We also find out that, sadly, a city icon, Buckley, did not survive the blast. And that's the episode. Moving on from a harrowing event that has sent shockwaves throughout the town. Luann gives up on hope and takes up photojournalism with less than stellar results. Dale thinks of conspiracies around the explosion, Buckley is laid to rest, but the most important elements are Hank and Bobby. Hank refuses to admit he has any kind of PTSD from surviving a blast like that. He feels numb and believes everything is fine, but he can't even work his grill without getting scared. He sees it as a weakness, but honestly, I don't think anyone could recover that quickly from his position. He starts going through the stages, hyper-focusing on small tasks and blowing off his work after Buck offers him his old job back, while everyone at Strickland thanks him for the blast. I really love the way they show all this and don't just tell you about it. There's no wacky music transition when Hank is scared or freaking out. It's treated as real and genuine, and I think that's what makes it such an excellent resource in trying to process trauma. It is okay to not be okay. I will say, Peggy shrugs everything off when Hank says he's fine, but the moment she sees he actually has a problem, she doesn't mock him, and she takes him to get the therapy he understandably needs after an event like that. Bobby hears his dad talking about death and he gets scared of losing his parents and runs away. Luann turns to her manger babies to offer herself some kind of closure and support. And I love that she has that for herself, and throughout the episode you see she's hurting in a way that even she can't properly articulate until she puts the puppets on. She's alone in this pain. She's depressed. She feels like she has nothing. Throughout this episode, the story of the tiger and the strawberry keeps coming up. And while everyone takes it as a joke, it's a perfect metaphor for enjoying the brief time we have on this earth. And as Hank explains it to Bobby while looking out at a sunset, it gives us both the ending of this episode and the start of this arc. The aftershocks of Propane Boom will be felt all the way to the end of this season, and the attention they keep bringing back to it is a reward for dedicated viewers. If you watched week after week, you didn't just get a fun Texas family doing wild things, you got a family growing and maturing as they look death in the face and won. Death of a propane salesman sets the stage for the season. It has our characters literally ending the episode looking at the future. This season is about time, growth, healing. And this episode prepares the audience for that. Things aren't always going to be funny, but you can get through it. Death of a Propane Salesman is a shining beacon of quality and an unquestioned 10 out of 10. What an awkward yet incredible episode. Bobby runs in the halls and gets stopped by the hall monitor Marie, played by Sarah Michelle Gellar, aka Buffy the Vampire Slayer at the time. Dave Thomas of Strange Brew and Second City fame would also guest star. Bobby charms her with his comedy and dips, thus starting a budding awkward romance between Marie, the 14-year-old vegetarian, and Bobby, the 12-year-old Bobby. Basically, she drags him along, encourages him to become vegetarian, kisses him, goes to a party and dances with other guys, which makes Bobby feel uncomfortable, and he tries to confront her about it, understandably confused, when she then breaks up with him, just absolutely destroying the poor boy's heart. He's a poor little Bobby-shaped husk for a good portion of the episode because he just got trampled on, and you really do feel for the poor guy being used and tossed aside when she's done having her fun with him. I mean, huge shout out to SMG. That's what all of us big Sarah Michelle Gellar fans call her, making Marie just absolutely horrible. The B story has Hank and the gang finding a couch that Con had left on the curb to get thrown out, and they turn it into the ultimate hangout couch. A couch where you have to be happy if you're sitting in it. This may be the most important B story yet. This shows the four working together to create something special to them. This is the bond that they've cultivated over decades. You cannot sit and tell me that you wouldn't want to do a weekend project where you and your buds tricked out a couch. There's something special about what they're doing here, and if you think into it, here's a way for Hank to cultivate a sense of normal after going through what he went through. The couch has rules and order and offers a little escape for everyone. It's fantastic. There's also a great little aside where Connie realizes she likes Bobby after he gets a girlfriend, and Luann is still processing the death of Buckley. Luann's hair doesn't grow back overnight. It would actually take several episodes for her to even look like she did last season, much less act the same. Luann is healing in real time, and we see her change as the season goes on, which is just incredible writing. What other show at the time was having development like that? She's not even the focus of the episode, but you still have these small nods that carry more and more impact. And then, one of the best scenes of the entire series happens. Bobby is still depressed when Hank and Peggy take him out to the Panhandler Steakhouse that Hank took Mr. Holloway to back in The Company Man. When they sit down, Bobby notices Marie at the table across from them, actively blowing him off. Marie emphasizes her staunch vegetarian order, and Bobby, like the absolute king that he is, in his pain decides to take on the 72-ounce top sirloin steak challenge. He sits at the table in the center of the restaurant, and this little champion scarfs that whole thing down in under 40 minutes. Marie tells him he could never do it, that no one cares, and you know what he does? He unbuttons his pants to make room, and he keeps going. This is the pettiest, most spiteful, absolute champ power play he could have done. This is why Bobby is one of the best characters. If you watch an episode here or there, you get glimpses of it. But if you watch in order, Bobby has come into his own identity more and more, and he is more resilient than people realize. And as he goes home a champion and Connie invites him over, he loses like 50 ounces of that steak, but he stuck that landing. He saw a challenge through to the finish and is going to be just fine without Marie. The couch gets taken by Bill in the shadow of the night, and I gotta say, they do a lot with Bill this season, and very, very little of it is positive. But I do like this power play, and they call it Bobby Love is uncomfortable and even awkward in parts as Bobby starts to spiral, but that's just what love is. That's what those emotions are like. They're awkward, weird, and just downright unsettling. I doubt any of us could look back at our preteen selves and gone, yeah, they were a sane and rational individual. Bobby does have a lot of growing to do, but this episode perfectly showcases the growing pains of adolescence. And they call it Bobby Love is a necessary watch and a solidly written 8 out of 10. Peggy decides to write for the local paper and starts trying to come up with quips to get published. Man, it's baffling why newspaper is a dying medium. Anyway, she starts to struggle with coming up with these short musings and starts to get headaches, so she turns to the one person she knows can help, John Redcorn. Yes, Peggy is the one person on the street that doesn't know what's going on between Nancy and John, and just genuinely believes that John is really, really good at getting rid of headaches. Now, this may be controversial, but this episode is absolutely necessary for going forward. This is a benchmark episode where we actually get some resolution to a story that's been running in the background since the show began. We know Joseph is not Dale's biological son. We know that John and Nancy have been having an affair, and we at least know that Hank knew about it and has kept his mouth shut. Imagine him not even telling Peggy for all these years. Peggy goes to John Redcorn for help with her headaches, and Hank believes that she is genuinely just going to get help because she is, but he can't help but get worried that John would try and do something. He gets protective of Peggy and even confronts John Redcorn to make sure he stays away from her, and that's when Peggy gets told the truth. She gets understandably upset that she was the last one to find out, even discovering Min knew before her. Her trust in the world going right out the window, and she decides that this shouldn't be a secret anymore. She's determined to tell Dale and take away his ignorance. She is ready to show him that everything in his life was a lie, because she was furious she didn't see it sooner. It's something you could argue is the morally right thing to do, even if it would cause immense pain, but then we get a scene. Joseph comes up to ask Dale for money for the movies. Something completely innocuous. Peggy is right there, ready to tell him everything, as he just thinks she wants to have an affair with him and he doesn't know how to tell Hank without just outright saying it and breaking his heart. He should see that Joseph isn't biologically his son. He should know deep down. But all he knows is that Joseph is his boy, and he's proud of him. He gives him money for the movies, and even gives him the last of the money in his wallet so he can buy some snacks to go with them. This episode needed to happen, because before this episode, we had not seen a single positive trait of Dale other than how he educated Joseph about smoking, which wasn't even that positive to begin with. He'd been horrible to Hank and just been a nuisance, but here we see him being a dad. The best dad he can be for his son. It humanizes Dale in that moment. You could tell him Joseph wasn't his biological son at this point, and I genuinely don't think it would matter. Sure, they keep playing the joke of him being ignorant to everything, but his love for Joseph is genuine, and even though it's such a small scene, it has a huge impact for the Gribble house. Again, there are jokes in the episode, but it's not an inherently funny adventure. There really won't be a genuinely funny episode again for another few episodes, and that almost speaks to the city still recovering from the blast and finding their own ways to move on like we'll see in the next 2 episodes. But for now, Peggy's headache is an eye-opening 8 out of 10. Hank wants to breed Ladybird so they can get a new puppy! Yay! He decides to breed her with Buck's dogs and is willing to go to any lengths to help her conceive. Dr. Rubin in this episode would actually be played by William H. Macy, who got his first Academy Award nomination a couple years prior for Fargo. And the quest to get Ladybird pregnant is juxtaposed with when Peggy and Hank were trying for Bobby. However, Hank is willing to do all the crazy things like IVF for Ladybird that he wasn't willing to humor for Peggy. Again, wild how far we've come in 20 years even with just IVF research. Hank reveals that he only wanted a puppy because when they got Ladybird, he was able to relax and Peggy was finally able to get pregnant. He wanted to use the puppy as a way for the two of them to try again, and he never wanted Peggy to think he didn't care or that he didn't love her. Though you can understand where she's coming from. If he had just communicated that, this episode would have been a lot better. We also get a side story of Bill telling Bobby whether or not he was adopted by bringing him dog biscuits he can't stop eating for some reason. It's amusing, but really just an extra bit. No, the more important thing is Dale becoming a bounty hunter, an element that will be brought up throughout the rest of the series. He completes a basic course, gets a hat, and he's off to his first bounty, which is just as incompetent as he is. Pregnant Pause is an easy episode to explain and definitely feels like a way that Hank is trying to move on. If they have another kid, they're living for the future. They're trying to expand their family and do something they couldn't do before. Pregnant Pause is an episode you need to watch at least once, though it doesn't necessarily have a ton of rewatchability. It's a sweet episode that does give us a look into Hank and Peggy's past, but ultimately, I don't know. It's a necessary episode for the story, but it doesn't have a lot to want to revisit. It's a perfectly decent 7 out of 10. Hank and Peggy are trying to have kids again, something literally set up in the previous episode, which Outstanding continuity there. Their doctor is played by Iqbal Theba, who you'd recognize as the principal in Glee, but he was also, funnily enough, in Basketball the same year this episode came out. Just a neat little intersection there. While they're trying to get better chances, Cotton shows up with a very pregnant Dee Dee in tow. Hank's about to have a baby brother. I feel like you need to sit and watch Pregnant Pause and Next to Shin back to back with absolutely no breaks, because if you do and see how they directly lead into one another, Pregnant Pause gets a lot better in hindsight. I really kind of wish this was a 45-minute long episode instead of 2 separate ones, just because of the elevated context in watching them back to back. It's never presented as a 2-parter, which is absolutely criminal, but it just goes to show the thought that's going into this season. Cotton gets cold feet about being a dad again and runs away while Hank, Bill, and Dale have to go and find him in Vegas. The heartfelt talk between Hank and Cotton at the end of the episode, where Cotton admits that Hank is a better dad because he made Bobby, is arguably one of the most important scenes in the entire show. For the first time, Cotton is acknowledging that Hank was better than him at something. They're actually getting along. While it might be fleeting, it shows that Cotton is changing. He's still not a good person and is still stuck in his old ways, but even he can acknowledge that Hank did right raising Bobby. Granted, in 2 episodes it won't matter, but for now, it's good. For now, this is progress. Next of Shin has all the comedy that Pregnant Pause just didn't really have. It's fun, yet still has that extra depth to it. Next of Shin is a refreshing and important 9 out of 10 that builds towards the future while trying to make peace with the past. It's very ironic that when I think about the absolute worst episodes of the season, they're all Peggy episodes. In previous seasons, she was a guiding light and you could usually see her side of things. Then there's episodes like Peggy's Pageant Fever where you wonder why it's going at all. Nancy is the former winner of Mrs. Heimlich County and a celebrity judge for the upcoming competition. Peggy thinks so highly of herself that she should be a shoo-in to win if she were to enter against the blonde idiots that usually fill out the competition. Nancy warns her against competing, but sure enough, Peggy knows better than anyone else. Now, you can say that Peggy is bullheaded and doesn't like getting told she can't do something, but man oh manity, this is not how you show that. We have seen her put down even when she excels at things like softball. We've seen her try and fight back against the system, and all of that has been great. It shows us who she is. And at its core, this episode does show that while Peggy is this rugged, salt-of-the-earth wife, she still wants to be considered beautiful like a pageant contestant. Like, there is something to celebrate there. There is an inkling of good. Hank is even supportive of her and wants to help her, even though she tells him it's just so she can win a new truck. Like, there's nothing wrong with the setup of the episode. It's when you meet the other contestants that the reality starts to sink in. Some are stay-at-home moms to 8 kids. Others are successful entrepreneurs and scientists. Peggy is just Peggy. She goes from respecting her competition to trying to find anyone in the arena that she has even the slightest advantage over. And this is where the spiral starts. She gets Buck to sponsor her, fires Luann as her stylist so she can get a pro to do it, and tries to hold her own, failing the entire way. And when it gets to the end and she's hobbling her way to the start of the competition, that's right, the entire episode takes place before the competition even truly begins, Hank drives up in a white truck to pick her up and take her home. He painted his red truck white so she could get her white truck, and he just wanted her to be happy. Which, like, real sweet for Hank and shows that he really does love his wife, something fierce, but there is just no payoff for anything in the episode. There is no real B story to distract from this A story either. It's just this constant spiral of Peggy getting worse and worse. She doesn't even reap the fruits of her actions because Hank pulls up to pick her up before she can be embarrassed because she underestimated the competition that blows her out of the water. Like, every angle I approach this from, Peggy is just the worst we've ever seen or written, and it's mind-boggling. This is by far the worst episode of the season yet, and just an uninteresting 4 out of 10. Which is such a shame, because it has guest stars like Kathy Ireland and Eric Estrada, and they're just to the service of nothing. And then we get the greatest Thanksgiving episode of all time. Easily one of the best episodes of King of the Hill, bar none. It's Thanksgiving at Hill House! As they get ready for the biggest shopping day of the year, something Peggy calls Black Friday, which great idea. Hank is excited that this year it's his mom coming to visit and not his dad. Sure enough, Tilly shows up and will be played by Beth Grant instead of Tammy Wynette going forward. Which you know Beth Grant. She's been in over 200 productions and does just an absolutely great job as Tilly. However, because no one can have anything nice, Cotton and Dee Dee crash Thanksgiving, and he starts talking about how horrible Tilly was right in front of Hank, who refuses to stand up for his own mother. This episode really kind of throws away all the goodwill and progress Cotton made not 2 episodes ago, which wouldn't be a problem if you just said, oh, well, it's just a Thanksgiving episode. It's not like it matters, but it really kind of does, though. When the family gets to the mall to start their Black Friday shopping, Hank, Dale, Boomhauer, and Bill go to a focus group about their favorite brand of lawnmower, where Hank finds out his lawnmower will be discontinued for a better high-tech one, and he has to convince the focus group it's a bad idea. The group consisting of Hank and the gang, Con, Cotton, and our 2 special guest stars. Lane Prattley of Prattley Motors, played by country music legend Dwight Yoakam, and Father Boyce Hubert, played by Billy Bob Thornton, hot off of Sling Blade and This Is True, Princess Mononoke, opposite Billy Crudup and Minnie Driver. And so yeah, it's 12 angry men, but with 9 men and a mower, and honestly, that's all it needs to be. We also get Luann and Bobby going ice skating so Luann can use Bobby as a way to hopefully get a date when she sees the ghost of Buckley and starts to break down, which is genuinely really sweet and it makes you hurt for Luann. However, it's because of the scene that the fact that Cotton is just so mean to Tilly is so unnecessary. It's like taking 4 steps back on his character. That being said, sure enough, bit by bit, Hank convinces everyone that the mower is horrible and a recipe for disaster, except for Cotton, who he finally stands up to and puts his foot down, defending his mower and his mother while Tilly watches from the other side of a 2-way mirror without him knowing. Peggy passed out the cobblers first thing in the morning. 9 Pretty Darn Angry Men is an episode you can watch out of order and absolutely love, and if you watch it in order, it feels just slightly out of place. It's some of the strongest writing in the show with great jokes and wonderful performances by all the actors involved. I mean, Billy Bob Thornton and Dwight Yoakam are barely recognizable and their delivery is top notch. It's a 10 out of 10 episode that knows how to wrap up a great narrative in a brisk 23 minutes. It's time for the big hunt, where Bobby is finally going to get his first big kill and have his rite of passage. Joseph, Bobby, and even Connie are revving up to go out and stake their claim on a deer of their own. Hank just has to get a hunting license for the season and they'll be good to go. Spoilers, he doesn't get one in time. Good hill hunting feels like the natural progression from how to fire a rifle without really trying. Bobby is a known avid shooter and a talented one at that. He has earned going out on his first hunt, and Hank just totally whiffs and fails to get a license. You feel bad for Bobby as he's bringing a cardboard deer out to practice while knowing he won't be able to go. We see Joseph do it, hear Connie cheer about hers, and when Hank feels guilty for denying Bobby that rite of passage, he tries to set him up at the hunting retreat at La Grunta Resort. When they go out to their nest and see the corn feeders turn the deer into effectively fish in a barrel, Bobby refuses to pull the trigger because it just doesn't feel right. That this isn't hunting. Now granted, not 3 minutes later he rams their truck into a deer by accident and gets his first kill, but still, in that moment he had the wherewithal to know that what they were doing wasn't the right way to do things. Bobby is a great character, and more importantly, a good kid. Throughout the show, he has this through line of growing and adapting and never losing that inherent integrity. It just goes to show the morals that Hank has instilled in his son. Sure, he's still dreaming of being a stand-up comic, but that doesn't mean he doesn't want the same rites of passage as the other kids or to not spend time with his dad. He has plenty of things to still accomplish, and Good Hill Hunting is an excellent reflection on just how much Bobby has grown since the start of the show. Good Hill Hunting is a great 8 out of 10. Huh, I wonder if La Grunta has any other attractions. Maybe like a dolphin tank or something. That'd be cool. Wouldn't anyone want to swim with the dolphins? It's Christmas time, and Bill is a depressed, crying mess. Ho, 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 ho! Yeah, he's remembering his ex-wife Lenore and spiraling as Hank and the gang try to look out for him during the hardest part of the year. I mean, oof, this is an episode I struggle to watch every time. Like, again, from a concept standpoint, these are not bad episodes. Season 3, by and far, is probably the best season of the entire show. But man, there are some low points. Bill tries to make sure he doesn't see Christmas by jumping off his roof, so Hank and the gang try to keep him alive. Bill gets an iguana, gets real awkward with a date, and then finally snaps after Hank yells at him. He begins wearing Lenore's old clothes and calls himself Lenore, refusing to believe that she could ever leave him and that he was totally fine. Like, what's the joke here? Bill is heartbroken and just a shell of a man, and Hank doesn't know how to approach helping him heal, so he just tries yelling at him to fix him. There are iguana parts that I do find funny, but overall, the episode is just painful to watch as you see Bill genuinely hurting, and no one seems to listen until Hank dresses up, goes out, and tells him that he's Lenore and never loved him. The resilient spirit Bill shows at the end of the episode is good to see, but man, it doesn't feel right in the context of the episode. I mean, compare this episode to the last Christmas episode where Hank went blind seeing his mom with her boyfriend. It didn't need to bash Hank when he was already down and out and gave us something hollow delightful. This episode just ties Christmas lights into a noose, says happy holidays, and spits on your feet. Pretty Dresses is an uncomfortable and undeserving 4 out of 10. The episode opens with Hank and the gang under investigation by the fire chief shown back in Propane Boom. The fire chief is played by Barry Corbin, who you'd recognize from The Closer or as the General in War Games. The episode is very usual suspects and mostly tells the story through flashbacks and is an excellent example of an unreliable narrator. The firefighters have the red flu, aka they're striking until they get better benefits, much like a blue flu. And so the volunteer firefighters are looking for, well, volunteers. So naturally, Hank and the gang sign up. They go to the firehouse and meet Chet Elderson and his sparking beer sign, and Chet would be played by Buddy Ebsen, who would most probably be known as Jed Clampett from the Beverly Hillbillies. And so the gang gets to pretend to be firefighters, and they are just really not great at their jobs. Chet even ends up dying in the middle of the episode, and they totally bungle carrying his casket. I mean, this is almost Stoogian how bad they are. They start attacking each other and fracturing until they get a call to put out a dumpster fire, and when they team up to save the day, it's quick resolved, and then the firehouse burns down. Dale had plugged in Chet's sparky sign, and the whole place just smoldered. We actually get to see each person's perspective as they recount what happened, and it's pretty cool. Boomhauer speaks fluent English, Bill imagined himself fatter and balder than he is, showing his negative self-image. There's a lot of creativity at play in this episode, and it's one of the few times a narrative device like this would be used in the series. There's a lot to really love about this episode, and between outstanding voice acting and it being a gang-focused episode, I don't know, I think there's a lot of greatness to take in. Even as they're giving their testimonies and Hank realizes what happens, he doesn't sell Dale out. He knows what's going on, and he looks out for his friends. That's who these people are at the end of the day. They're brothers, not through blood, but through what they've endured together. They went to state. This episode isn't building a deeper narrative or recounting the blast. It doesn't have Bill putting on Lenore's dresses. It's just 4 friends living their boyhood dream together. A Firefighting We Will Go is a must-watch 9 to even 10 out of 10. This is an episode. I just want to start by saying Kathy Najimy is really good as Peggy. She has brought the character to life like only she can. Anything I have to say negative about Peggy or really any of the characters is just directed at how the character is written. Vocal deliveries are a staple of King of the Hill, and I genuinely believe they're what has helped it maintain its longevity. I really don't want to talk about this episode. Peggy is assigned to teach Spanish when she gets evaluated. However, Dooley and Clark are in the class and start harassing her and distracting other students. She gets a negative evaluation and just told she needs improvement. She lost control of the classroom. It happens, and Dooley and Clark were just being bullies. You know, kids will be kids. The next day, however, when she goes to confiscate their watches that they were using to blind her, Dooley reaches over and pantses Peggy in front of the entire class. Peggy is understandably mortified and in a moment of weakness snaps, whips Dooley over her knee, and spanks him. She ultimately gets fired for her actions, even though Dooley's parents forgive her, because they know that their son is awful. On the one hand, I really don't think I can blame Peggy for doing that. What Dooley did is horrific, and yeah, someone would snap if that happened to them. On the other, this is kinda where that understanding goes out the window. Peggy is miserable after losing her job, and Cotton, of all people, comes to her defense because she got fired for spanking a kid, and he doesn't see the problem in that. He even gets the principal of Hank's old school to fight for her to get her job back, and gives her old Spanky the infamous paddle that sends a chill down even Hank's back, and that's a man, canonically, with no ass. She takes the paddle and uses it as an instrument of fear in her classrooms, and goes mad with power. She realizes the paddle instills just fear and decides to teach Spanish with the flair that only she can, and a mace instead. I don't know, this is a complex episode that I feel like it was more of a social conversation than an episode. It oddly puts Cotton in a better light when he agrees to help Hank's wife, but the whole paddle thing, especially her whipping it out to smack Joseph, just does not make Peggy look good at all. This is a rough episode, and I'm not about to say it's a must-watch for anyone. Skip it if you have to. To Spank with Love is a 2 out of 10. And before you go, it's not a mace, it's a flail. Fine, I acknowledge it's a flail. There you go. The Cougars are faced with a losing season, and Bobby is struggling on the team. Hank tries to instill the guidance he got from his coach, Coach Sowers, that helped take him, Bill, Dale, and Boomhauer to state, and when he can't do it on his own, he actually brings in Coach Sowers himself. I actually love that we get to see how Hank and the gang got to state. While we do know what happened at state and the tragedy that ensued, it is still good to see how their teamwork got them that far. Coach Sowers is played by Phil Hendry, who you'd probably recognize as like every fourth voice in F is for Family, and I promise that's not a bad thing. I genuinely believe Phil Hendry is a huge part of why F is for Family has the chemistry it does. His delivery is absolutely astounding, and his comedic timing is second to none. I really enjoy Phil Hendry, and having him as Coach Salt Tablet Sowers is fantastic. Anyway, he starts running the boys ragged in drills, and they get enticed by the soft, non-violent world of soccer, mused to them by Coach Lucas, played by a little-known actor named Will Ferrell, who, a few years after this episode, would actually play the dad in the short-lived animated series, The Oblongs. Bobby and Joseph see that the team is struggling when everyone defects to soccer, and their competitive spirit gets the best of them as they head back to football to save the day. Mostly just Bobby convincing Joseph to go back and fight for his team. I genuinely believe Phil Hendry defines this episode. Like, I didn't even realize Will Ferrell was in the episode until rewatching it for this time. And now, while it does make a lot of sense, it makes me wonder if he did Kicking and Screaming because of this episode, Phil Hendry just brings such an energy to the episode as Coach Sowers that he pulls you in and honestly overshadows Will Ferrell of all people. I don't know, sometimes there's just one character that you can't believe got greenlit, and then there they are kissing Bill because he got him to state because the coach said he would. 3 coaches and a Bobby is a surreal but most righteous 8 out of 10. Con invites Hank to take a look at his system analyst job after he drives home in a brand new company car. He takes him into a super confidential area and shows Hank a new driver that he gets to hit a ball with and watch it fly clear across the hangar. Now, should Con have gloated about a giant secret government contract? No. Should Hank have turned around and blabbed it to his friends when he knew it was top secret and promised Con he wouldn't tell anyone? Also no. Do I think he probably could have told everyone except for Bill? Definitely. Do I think it would have gotten around to Bill anyway? Absolutely. There's no escaping it. Maybe just keep your mouth shut, Hank. Maybe everyone would do a lot better. But I really kind of feel Hank was definitely more in the wrong. As the episode goes on, Con loses his job and disappears to try and find another job to provide for his family. He can't face them as a loser. He can't lose. He's an immigrant. He has to be better. He has to try harder. We see Hank helping Min out because Peggy tells him to, and then gets jealous when he does too much for her. The episode has some jokes and a solid through line that does make sense by the end, but getting there is a bit of a slog. It's just a grind in the second act that doesn't really feel like it accomplishes much. Sure, it does build out Min and Con's relationship and shows that they genuinely love one another. They have a chemistry that works for them, but also that she needs Con and he needs his family. Everything he's doing is so he can be a proud beacon to inspire Connie and make his wife proud of him. In his own way, he has to be right. He has to get the approval that he is doing a good job. Deconstructing Henry is probably the best Hank and Con episode so far, and actually develops Con a lot better than before, but man, that's still just not saying much. The episode as a whole is a 6 out of 10 that at least has some of the better jokes of the season to buffer and get you through, but it still just kind of grinds in the middle half. Bill is upset Boomhauer is letting Bobby watch his house while he's out of town. Sure, grown man jealous of a child, these things happen. Not the focus of the episode, however. No. Luann is cutting the hair of an absolute legend. One Rad Thibodeaux, aka Rad Thibodeau, a man in the industry. The entertainment industry. His smooth southern drawl would be delivered by none other than Matthew McConaughey. He does an absolutely dynamite performance. I mean, he is easily one of the best guest stars in the entire show. When he hands Hank the AOL CDs with the confidence of a man that's killed a god, I mean, it makes the episode sing. He starts to drive around romancing Luann and even impressing Bobby until he finds out about Boomhauer's house and decides to throw a massive party that Hank and Peggy have to stop. Now, this first half of the episode, oh, that's easily 10 out of 10. That's some peak Hillage right there. But halfway through, Rad is just gone. The rest of the episode is Luann and Bobby getting into a prank war that ends up with Bobby replacing Luann's birth control with candy, and then they trick Bobby into thinking he got his cousin pregnant, and that they need to get married, so they throw a fake wedding to make the two miserable and teach him a lesson. Did you expect that was where the episode was going? If not for the episode title, there really aren't a ton of clues. It's just such a shame that the first half is so strong, and while the second half does have jokes, like, how is this a good punishment? What do they really learn from this? Not to trust Hank and Peggy, that anything can be fake? It's an episode that starts brilliantly and then just kind of drops the plot halfway through into a vat of molasses, picks it up, dusts it off, and says it's good enough. Man, that first half is really, really good, though. I mean, I could listen to Rad just ramble for hours. Matthew McConaughey brought such an incredibly scummy character to life masterfully. I mean, the man is a talented voice actor, having been in Sing and Agent Elvis on Netflix, but man, this was just something else. The Wedding of Bobby Hill is an odd 7 out of 10. The gang go to a magic show for a surprise birthday for Nancy. Hank, being the Sergeant Buzzkill he is, guesses how all the magic tricks are done until Peggy is brought on stage and disappears, and no one agrees to tell him how the one joke that stumped him was done. This, coupled with the fact that he refuses to let Bobby paint clouds in his blue room, shows that he's just not imaginative. Personally, I think this is a bridge too far Hank episode. Hank has been shown to be a musician even earlier in the season. He should understand the importance of creativity and imagination. He makes his own songs. Why wouldn't he encourage some kind of artistic liberty? I don't know. You'd think Handyman Hank would actually be interested in the mechanisms needed to help make such impressive tricks possible. No, he locks Peggy in a box until she tells him what the trick was, and even then, she still refuses. Like, good on Peggy for staying resilient, and this is an episode where she's definitely in the right, but man, it just feels awkward. I'll also say I don't see why they were mad at the Bobby Jesus Magic Show. I thought that was great. Plus, there was a very niche but still very prolific amount of Christian magicians in the 90s that would peddle all kinds of home VHS tapes to get you to learn magic tricks with the Lord. I feel like it could have been something of a deep cut reference that just never really materialized. The end fight also just feels unearned. A kick to the shin and everything's better. Got it. Cool. I don't know. I like that Hank is trying to be imaginative at the end, but it just doesn't wipe away the rest of the episode. The end of the episode has Bobby in a mask explaining how the trick was done. This was a reference to Val Valentino, aka the Masked Magician from the Fox series Breaking the Magician's Code, where Val would show off how some of the most famous magic tricks were performed. It's a great reference that, honestly, watch this episode, then watch some Breaking the Magician's Code, cause it's a surreal watch. Mitch Pileggi from X-Files was the narrator/host, and that's just some good reality TV right there. Sleight of Hank is a magical 8 out of 10. When Luann gets a job as a drink girl at La Grunta, she finally gets enough money to pay Hank back for his kindness and decides to get him time in a tank with a dolphin! Yay! What a relaxing thing! It's like Echo the Dolphin, you guys! Hank pretends to go golfing and instead goes to swim with the dolphin that Luann paid a lot of money for. The dolphin then proceeds to slam him against the wall and try and have its way with him. La Grunta pays Hank off and has him sign a waiver, but the nightmares of that horrible day haunt Hank. He gets mocked as he struggles through his day. We also see him and Peggy still actively trying for kids, but naturally he can't perform because all he hears are dolphin noises. Meanwhile, Billy West plays the most punchable golfer who gets handsy with Luann and causes her to shut down and try and keep quiet about it. She tries to dress herself down so that they won't find her attractive and tries to hide away. But when Hank sees what's going on after returning the ill-gotten swag of silencing, he grabs the golfer and chucks him into the tank with the dolphin for some one-on-one time. This episode really serves a greater purpose in that it shows Hank genuinely and unequivocally cares for Luann and will never tell her to be quiet about being harassed. It's much like Bobby at the racetrack. He had no idea it was that bad, but once he found out, he took matters into his own hands. Like, on paper, this sounds like an episode that jumped the shark and was just being absurd for the sake of being absurd. But honestly, I think it was handled really well. They'd already set up La Grunta as this wild resort with all kinds of amenities, and I don't know, they take the necessary time to humanize Hank throughout it all. Weirdly enough, the episode where Hank gets assaulted by a dolphin might be one of the strongest written episodes of the season, and that's a very weird thing to say. There's commentary, jokes, and a satisfying conclusion. Everything you need for an episode to feel truly whole, even if it's got Flipper in the A story. John Vitti Presents Return to La Grunta is a 9 out of 10. Hank's mom, Tilly, is taking her friends to a miniature museum, but Hank is afraid that they're not going to be able to handle it on their own, so he decides to drive them. Tilly's friends include Maureen, played by Uta Hagen, Lillian, played by Phyllis Diller, who would also play Peter's mom in Family Guy until she passed. Oh, and I don't think you've heard of her, she's a little bit of an older name, but Delia is played by the taken well before her time, Betty White. And so Hank takes the girls to the island where, lo and behold, it's MTV Spring Break, hosted by DJ, played by the king of Spring Break himself, Pauly Shore. I had to Google to see if they were still doing MTV Spring Break post-2020, and I actually found out they stopped doing it back in 2014. Man, talk about a cultural phenomenon taken with a whisper, not a bang. And so yeah, Hank has to corral a bunch of old ladies on Party Island and get them out of there in time for the last ferry. We find out that Tilly used miniatures to escape her horrible marriage with Cotton, and that they may very well be the reason she's still around to this day. Hank learns to appreciate the quiet strength of his mom, and honestly, huge shout out to Beth Grant for how she brings Tilly to life. You can tell she's not Tammy Wynette, but she still brings such a charm and grace to the role, and does a downright beautiful job. We also get this great B story where Peggy keeps the family safe from a very forward and invasive Bill. I mean, they are really character assassinating Bill this season, but it really kind of works here. Just seeing her be no nonsense with him is absolutely great. Escape from Party Island is chaotic. It's a lot going on, even though it's a really simple premise. It's got great quick jokes, but the middle does drag quite a bit. They talk about how they have an hour till the last ferry and the sun is clearly up in the middle of the sky, and then the next shot it's the end of dusk and they're racing to make it on. Like, what? It's an episode that can never quite figure out the proper pacing and just loses itself to that spring break vibe. Escape from Party Island is a bodacious 8 out of 10. It's a weird callback episode. What 2 episodes do you think will be referenced in an episode in the back half of Season 3? And they call it Bobby Love? Hey, great and smart guess. Good for you, you critic in training. Hank's unmentionable problem. Why would you guess that? Are you psychic? Do you have the ESPN? Yeah, no, Bobby gets obsessed with deli food and Hank's meat pack colon MRI is used as an art piece. Bobby has a dance coming up and Connie wants to go with him so they can dance and kiss and enjoy themselves. However, Bobby is scared of being hurt again, like with Marie, and so he keeps finding excuses to blow Connie off and consume more chicken liver, eventually developing gout and needing a rascal to get around because of it. Hank wants to fight an artist for showing his colon at an art gallery without his consent. Which, you know what? That's pretty dang fair. There's a fine line to be crossed there, and I actually am on Hank's side every step of the B story. The A story just kinda drags. Deep down, you know what Bobby is going to do, but he just keeps spinning his rascal wheels and looking for more and more excuses. Again, the show handles the awkwardness of being a kid great, but I don't know if it works all that well in this episode. Bobby is taking a rascal from his school to the mall to load up on deli food, and just what kind of magical 90s rascal is getting that kind of battery life? There's just so many things you have to suspend your disbelief on that just doesn't mean anything. Now, is the end where he fights through the pain to dance with Connie sweet and well-deserved? Absolutely. It just feels like an episode that could have been 10 minutes and been fine. Love Hurts is a sweet, though long in the neck, 8 out of 10. When Hank and Bobby go to visit Wichita Falls, home of the training camp of the Dallas Cowboys, Bobby falls in love with the magic of Wichita and wants to move out of Arlen when he gets older to stake his claim as a stand-up comic. Hank decides that he wants to give the kids something to stay for and tries to revitalize Arlen by putting together a recruitment video to entice the Dallas Cowboys to move their training camp to Arlen. Just in case you were wondering, Arlen isn't real and the Cowboys had their training camp in Oxnard, California in 2023. But suspend your disbelief for just 23 minutes, if you will. Hank's cowboy movie is bar none the best episode of the season. There is a small town magic to Hank's attempts to bring the Cowboys to Arlen that even if you know he won't succeed, you really, really want him to. He wants his family to have a future in Arlen. He doesn't want to lose Bobby and he wants to help the city he loves. This is who Hank is. Now sure, he gets all his friends in on it, Nancy and Peggy clash over if it's Arlenites or Arlenians, Boomhauer gets attacked by a mouse while he's in an armadillo costume, Leonard Skinner plays, there is a wackiness around it, but seeing him on the trip with just him and Bobby and seeing them bond and then having him try and keep that flame going is genuinely touching. Cotton would have never even humored the idea for Hank. There is just such an unabashed passion in this episode, and it really does feel like they captured the magic of the show in just 23 minutes. You could end the entire show on Hank's cowboy movie and it would feel complete. Sure, the first high-production video gets absolutely destroyed, but the second, made of mostly original footage, is terrific. It shows that these are families, not individual characters. The scenes they animated aren't done for just comedic effect, they're supposed to show how the families have grown through the years and how they give life to Arlen. And the final shot of the gang on the couch they worked on from And They Call It Bobby Love just brings it all together. Hank's cowboy movie is a perfect episode. It's an 11 out of 10. There's nothing that needs to be changed because beat for beat it is the strongest the writing has been and will ever be. It's episodes like this that cement King of the Hill as one of the greats. Dale borrows Hank's mower after his breaks down and takes it for a joyride before filling its tank with soda and returning it. He then gets a brand new state-of-the-art mower and refuses to let any of the gang mess with it while telling them how much better than them he is. Hank gets fed up and decides to steal Dale's mower and hold it hostage while sending him cryptic messages to torment him. Bobby finds the mower and confronts his dad, who has to explain the prank, and the more he explains it, the less funny it really sounds. So Hank decides to return the mower and gets chastised by Nancy for breaking her husband's trust, which I don't know. I get why she'd say that, but also she's kind of the last person that should. Stones in glass houses and whatnot, all I'm saying. Like, John Redcorn is literally climbing in her window not 10 minutes prior in the episode. I just feel like Joseph would have been a better person, or, you know, just Hank's conscience. Didn't really need someone there. Don't need anyone really spelling it out for him. Anyway, the police get the wrong idea when Dale is spraying a clock tower and think they have an active hostage situation. And because Dale is Dale, he starts to spiral. And the episode comes to a standstill at the standoff. Now, in any other show, that would be a bad thing, but in this episode, we really see how Dale operates, and his conspiracies start to unravel as you figure out why he thinks like he does. He's scared, he's squirrely, and he doesn't even trust himself, but he trusts Hank more than anyone. Sure, he's a horrible friend most of the time, but when the cards are down, you can expect him to run with his tail between his legs. That is not the glowing mark I thought it was gonna be, but he trusts Hank. He knows if he's in a bad situation, he can count on his best bud. Dale's a good dad that in his own way trusts and loves his childhood friends. He's just got a really horrible way of showing it. This is a great episode that gives Johnny Hardwick a chance to just go all in on Dale and have some real, genuine fun. His line delivery is top-notch, and this is one of the funniest episodes of the season, in no small part due to him. Dog Dale Afternoon is a conspiratorially funny 10 out of 10. Awkward is the best way to describe this episode. It's our first appearance of Reverend Stroop, the new reverend at the Hills Church. In her freshman outing, she's voiced by comedy legend Mary Tyler Moore of, you guessed it, The Mary Tyler Moore Show. She'd be replaced by Ashley Gardner for future appearances. Reverend Stroop is from the beautiful snow-covered land of Minnesota there. Go Vikings, you know. And she is just so delighted to be preaching in little old Texas, so she brings some lutefisk for everyone to enjoy from her home. Bobby has a love of all things deli food. What could possibly go wrong? Alright, I'm just gonna say it. I don't think Bobby was in the wrong this episode, but he sure should have said something. Bobby eats the entire platter of lutefisk and throws it in the trash. Stroop thinks they hated the lutefisk and threw it in the trash without eating any of it. Lutefisk is fermented whitefish. If it was in that trash, you were gonna smell it. If she took the time to look in the trash or even see the dish was empty, she'd see somebody at least ate it. Now, should he have thrown out the platter? No, but I at least get why he'd feel guilty. Anyway, not a great start with Stroop. Then Cotton comes to town, hates that there's a female preacher, and scoffs at it. Bobby, having had an entire platter of lutefisk the previous night, needs to go to the bathroom and unleash the Krakatoa of bowel movements. When he does, Cotton lights a match and calls him the Stink Man, unaware that it was Bobby, which that sounds like the most Danny DeVito thing Cotton could call anyone, just the Stink Man. Bobby takes the matches and tries to burn away his devastating odor, and accidentally lets a lit match end up in the trash as the church burns down. The boy feverishly shook every match, and sure, he should have run them underwater first, but I mean, it's not like he was just yeeting matches in the trash. Naturally, he does feel horrible about it, but doesn't want to fess up so people think he's starving himself in solidarity instead, when he most certainly isn't. They find the matchbook, thinks it's Cotton that burnt the church down, and the town turns on the actually innocent Cotton. Now, I had someone say that Cotton is not a bad person, just from a different time. I would say that that's at least wrong for how he's portrayed for the first 2 seasons. Season 3 has spent a lot of time rehabbing Cotton and putting a lot of work into showing he is not without some redeeming qualities. He does want to do right by Dee Dee and the baby. He does love Bobby more than anything. Yes, he did steal Santa Anna's leg, but he did not burn down a church. I know people get upset that Peggy tries to turn him into the authorities and tries to get his confession on tape, but this man has been downright vile to her and her husband for decades. Sure, he helped her get her job back, but he also has just been a monster that has ruined at least her most recent Thanksgiving. Like, I don't know, I get the anger there. But when Bobby tells them it was him, Cotton takes the fall for the boy. Cotton will do anything to keep Bobby safe, and it's that kind of self-sacrifice that I think makes Cotton just a little better, slowly but surely. All things considered, you could have looked at Dee Dee getting pregnant right after they think Cotton has dementia as kinda weird and unsettling if you think about it for too long. But here he is, perfectly aware of what's going on, and honestly seems the sharpest out of anyone, and is willing to pretend to be the unaware old man if it saves his grandson. This episode needs to happen for Cotton to have the growth he has next season. Revenge of the Lutefisk is a coming to God and a solid 8 out of 10. Peggy gets a letter from a former student that is currently 40 and in prison on death row. Peggy, the substitute Spanish teacher with a 12-year-old son, has a former 40-year-old student in prison. It's probably fine. He talks about how much she inspired him and how he wishes he could learn from her again. Peggy agrees to teach him how to read and even decides to teach him Boggle. He just wishes he could play on his grandma's Boggle set just one more time before he goes to the great prison in the sky. So naturally, Peggy goes to pick it up from his girlfriend on the outside to bring it to him. Meanwhile, the entire time, Hank tells her not to do it and seems incredibly suspicious of the man. What's to be suspicious of? Anyone can get put on death row. Anyway, yeah, unlike 3 days at the condo, this time Peggy actually is a mule and she's been smuggling booger sugar into Wesley under the guise of timer sand. He threatens that if she doesn't keep doing it, he'll rat her out to the warden, and so she has to keep doing it or lose her freedom. Hank can't think of a way to get her out, and they try to make the most of their time together before she has to turn herself into the warden. I love that they're so deeply in love and they're crying and he doesn't want to lose her, but also Peggy just should have listened to Hank in the first place on this one. He's not always right, but there was more red flags there than a ski resort. Peggy is the smartest person in any room until she isn't, and I really kinda hate that there's so many episodes dependent on just stripping away all the weight of her character and just making her this fighting for the sake of fighting, awkward interpretation of her character. I will say the end of the episode at least feels like a return to form for Peggy. It doesn't salvage the episode, but it sure does help. When she goes to meet the warden, Wesley tells the whole story and doesn't embellish a bit, but she tells him to present the evidence. If she brought in all this Scarface sweetener, there should be some left, right? Nope, he snorted his evidence. She calls his bluff and gets to walk free. That is Peggy. That is what Peggy does. And it's not to say that there aren't episodes that do that side of Peggy well, it's just upsetting when you get overly confident, incompetent Peggy juxtaposed with the Peggy we're used to in the exact same episode. She's as dumb or as smart as the episode needs her to be, and it's setting her up for a great fall. Death in Texas is a powder-filled 8 out of 10. Con buys Buckley's old trampoline, and Hank and the gang want to fix it up, which he'll let them do if they mow his lawn for a week. They're weird, but you gotta love the gang. Anyway, Luann is struggling through beauty school with a final coming up, and she is spiraling bad. She's at her lowest point, and as she looks outside, she sees Buckley on his trampoline. She goes out, and one of the most magical scenes of the entire show jumps on the trampoline with Buckley's angel, while Life in a Northern Town by the Dream Academy plays in the distance. She goes on to tell everyone what she saw, what she experienced, and no one believes her. Or almost no one. Con really is shaken up from the loss of Bucky. He'd never say it, but he misses the Hey Man. While Luann is going to her beauty final, the ghost of Buckley shows up while she's already losing her mind and tells her that she's going to fail, that Jesus has a purpose for her that isn't beauty school. He can't say what, but while she's screaming at him and telling him how horrible he is and was, she runs off the road and her car gets wrecked. There's no way she'd make it to her final in time now. However, in her time of crisis, she's saved by some women at the community college who think she was a student much like them. Luann, who had always been told she was dumb, told she wasn't good enough, now sees herself in a new light. She gets her deposit back from beauty school and enrolls in community college to just try. To just do something to move up in this horribly unfair world to her. Hank offers for her to stay with them while she goes to school, and Buckley walks off into the sunset after finding his halo. This is the magic of King of the Hill. You can believe Buckley is an actual angel, and you can believe he was just a metaphor given form or something. No matter what, you have to acknowledge that this is a beautiful piece of animation. I will never be mad at a show for trying something different or trying to be unique. Much like the mysterious voyage of our Homer, this is the upper echelon of creativity in network animation at the time. Sure, we always had things like Heavy Metal, Robot Carnival, Aeon Flux, but this was on broadcast TV, and look at all the incredible things they were able to do with it. Look at the spirit, the heart they were able to imbue into some animation cells. Wings of the Dope is an enlightening, awe-inspiring 10 out of 10. Hank is the coach for Strickland's softball team, and Thatherton gets a former pro to join his team to beat them in the league. So Hank has to put together a team and crush the competition. Peggy is a star softball player, and you know exactly where this is going to go. Peggy joins the team. Hank is the coach. She doesn't listen to him because she knows what she's doing and starts to get the yips when he throws her off her game. You've seen it before. But honestly, it's a nice return to zero for the series before going into the season finale. Here you have Peggy in her element that we've seen as far back as Hank's Got the Willies. This is one of the things she knows better than anyone, and the only reason Hank is challenging her is because people are listening to her over him. It's Hank being petty. Wanna guess what cures her yips? It's gonna blow your mind. Hank walks off and benches himself, learning to trust his wife and knows that she knows what she's doing. Wow, that's wow. I'm so glad they're cutting against the grain this go around. So good to know that we're getting really inventive morals at the end. I don't know. It's good to have a palate cleanser episode like this, especially towards the end of the season, because they allow you to look back and appreciate the journey. Megalomart blew up so long ago, and it finally feels like there's a semblance of normal again. Luann is going to college, Bobby has a romance with Connie, Hank is living life again, and we even got closure on Buckley last episode. Take Me Out of the Ball Game is not a bad episode, just a predictable one, and sometimes predictable is perfectly okay. Take Me Out of the Ball Game is a perfectly enjoyable and a knock out of the park 9 out of 10. And here we are, the season finale. It's Hank and Peggy's 20th anniversary. They throw a party, get their friends together for a slideshow, and through it all, Peggy just seems so out of it. When they have a weekend to themselves, or so they think, with Luann eventually sneaking back in, and Bobby with Cotton and Dee Dee while they wait for Dee Dee to have the baby, Peggy confesses she hates that she doesn't see who they were 20 years ago anymore. She misses who they were when they were younger. They go to a revolving restaurant, and I'll admit it, Hank is just the worst here. Peggy wants a drink, he asks about his beer if she gets a drink, so she just goes with water, and then instead of getting a water in solidarity or something, Hank just goes ahead and gets his beer instead of letting his wife celebrate in the way she wanted to. I don't know, it feels kinda scummy, especially on the finale. Anyway, after this, they get drunk on tequila and in the morning get some hair of the dog in them when they decide to go skydiving, all while Dee Dee is giving birth while Cotton and Topsy are at the strip club, so Bobby has to drive her to the hospital. Hank goes down and lands with a smile on his face and ecstatic, even radioing up to tell Peggy to do it before telling her that Dee Dee is having her baby. Peggy decides to jump after all, and when it's time to pull the string, nothing happens. She pulls her back up, and nothing. She falls and falls until, boom, she lands right in the dirt. I told you the show is setting up for Peggy to have a great fall. Like, this episode has a very rare sped up intro because it's just so packed with content to set up all the stories that need a payoff when we start up season 4. There's so much to take in that by the time Free Falling is playing over the end credits, you can't help but laugh hysterically. As Old as the Hills feels like the best way to kill off a character if they actually want to go through with it. Now, of course, Peggy does miraculously survive, spoilers, but man, makes you wonder what could have been. As Old as the Hills ends the season on that same panicked energy it started on. They got you feeling comfortable and safe with Take Me Out of the Ball Game, and then, bam, Peggy Pancake. As Old as the Hills is a free-falling 9 out of 10 that keeps you on the edge of your seat and laughing in shock. A delicate balance only King of the Hill could pull off. And there we have it, that's season 3! Anything you think I was right on? Wrong on? What was your favorite episode of the season? Least favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Season 3 was a lot, but after Megalomart went up in smoke, you could feel the story take steps into uncharted territory. Season 3 was very much about changing the status quo, about healing and facing an uncertain future. We saw Bobby grow as a person, Dale and Cotton get better humanized, and we even saw the descent of Peggy Hill, literally. Just straight down. And as we turn towards season 4, we're going to get a much more out there season. We'll get another 2-parter, a downright obsolete treasure of an episode, and of course, we get to meet the Propaniacs. And like always, if you like what you saw, make sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends we're out here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I promise not to be a bore when we delve into Season 4. Remember to keep fighting, stay strong, drink plenty of water, and know I believe in you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time, Arlenites.